Hi people, we know we're back again as always, and as usual. Yeah, it's geolocation chart casting time again. In this segment, I'm going to be covering Russia, just for the hell of it. I felt like it. The Russian Federation, Mother Russia. So yeah, let's begin. The basics as usual. The first house stands for Russia's geographical outline. The second house represents Russian economy. Third house represents Russian infrastructure. The fourth house stands for Russia's domestic life or the domestic life of its average citizens. The fifth house stands for Russia's romantic and entertainment and related life. So things you can do for fun and whatnot, as well as a love life overall in Russia. Sixth house stands for overall working conditions and circumstances in Russia regarding work and also for the health of the population overall. The seventh house stands for how well Russians bond with each other at a deep seated spiritual level, so at a mental level. How well they bond, how well they form relationships of all kinds. The eighth house stands for Russia's financial life from the perspective of financial institutions such as banks. The ninth house stands for foreign connections that Russia has and overall foreign trade and whatnot. The 10th house stands for the lawmakers and the people that call the shots in Russia, such as high end politicians that pass bills and laws, as well as its law enforcement and anyone that has essentially the title of enforcement at the end of their career based name or their employment based name. The 11th house stands for the overall population in Russia, public life overall. And the 12th house essentially stands for any kind of marine-based activity on a heavy scale or heavy basis, and it just goes on. So yeah, let's begin. First house ruled by Libra, with the thingy, the south node in it, in Scorpio stationary, what the S stands for, simply stands for the fact that Russia's geographical outlook is balanced in general. Balance in the sense that balance, or in a certain context, imbalance. But overall, you would say that Russia has it all. Russia has mountains, Russia has flat terrain, Russia has plenty of flora and fauna, wildlife, etc. It just goes on. This also stands for the fact that Russia also has within Russia's overall territory, there are quite a couple of rivers. We're talking about swamps, marshes, alongside marine wildlife, okay, that inhabit these areas. Now, as you can tell, the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, the ninth, and the 10th house only have activity. The rest is neutral, so we'll just ignore them. Now, Pluto is in Aquarius in the fourth house, which stands for the fact that, generally speaking, Russia, in terms of governmental structure, is more, how do I put this? Is more monarchic in nature. So, from a practical perspective, politically speaking, generally speaking, the population has a monarch or someone similar, someone that is either unofficially or similarly a monarch, someone that quote unquote calls the shots. A president or prime minister or similar that essentially resides over the vast majority of people, over the Russian population, and generally speaking, he is the one that has the majority of say in terms of what happens and what doesn't happen. A plain and simple ruler. Um, and this also stands for the fact that Russia has a lot of mining activity and a lot of people, essentially, especially people that have a lot of resources at their disposal, they get it from mining and other related activity, any terrestrial based activity that is a good source of revenue. That's why Pluto is quite strong in Aquarius. Um, I'll get to more information at the end. Sorry. I'll get to more information in the end. In any case, Saturn is in Pisces in the fifth house, which stands for the fact that Russia, when it comes to entertainment venues and overall romance, there is a lot of frigidity. By frigidity, I mean there's a lot of coldness, really. Russian people aren't exactly the romantic types. They're quite cold and unfeeling when it comes to romance in general, and also when it comes to doing things for fun, entertainment, things like that. They also have a tendency to not be as happy and as outgoing compared to other countries in the world. when we're talking about the population as a whole on average. In the sixth house, you have the majority of activity. You've got Neptune in Pisces, which stands for the fact that um, Russia either contains or has is surrounded by a lot of bodies of water, specifically at an oceanic level. And that does create a good deal of employment opportunities. Think of anything that the sea offers in the way of employment for a person: fishing, um, hunting for marine wildlife, you name it, extracting salt water from the ocean and then converting it into sweet water or drinkable water or brackish water. You name it. Bottom line is there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that can be created by using the sea or by using the ocean or oceans as a source, so to speak, literally and figuratively. Now we have the sun there, which is in Aries, which stands for the fact that there is a tremendous amount of activity when it comes to work. A lot of people, they work, they enjoy working, but it also stands for the fact that generally speaking, a good deal of jobs are on the rough end, on the potentially hostile conditions, very hostile conditions even. Chiron we can ignore. Jupiter says the same thing, but Jupiter says that there is an excess of blue collar based labor present on the job market. So a lot of people work in potentially dangerous areas. Think of factory work, think of mining work, think of anything that is potentially hazardous to your health or to your life. And that is labor based, that requires a heavy amount of lifting, carrying, stuff like that. So not a lot in the way of administration. Now, Mercury is in Aries, which represents the men in general, and this essentially Mercury in Aries not very good. Also conjunct the seventh house, which stands for the fact that men in general, they act more based on impulse because they're used to it. That's why it's conjunct all of these. That's why Mercury is conjunct Jupiter, and it's not conjunct the Sun. It's conjunct Jupiter and Chiron. The men, because they're used to doing this, to living this way at work or adopting this mentality when they're at work, lifting heavy things, doing things based on impulse rather based on thinking or logic or rationale. That's the mentality they adopt overall, and that's also why it spills on over to the seventh house. And speaking of the seventh house, what I mean thereby is that the men also bring this mentality with them to to essentially forming bonds with people, which does not work out well in general. They're aggressive and impulsive sometimes. They're very temperamental, very, they're very finicky and very. They have a tendency to have a temper when it comes to dealing with people, when it comes to forming friendships, relationships, when it comes to bonding overall with people. Things don't go well because of said or aforementioned reasons. And yeah, for the rest, the North Node is here, which stands for the fact that Russia should focus on this. Its population should focus on adopting a stable mentality and developing more close bonds with each other. The population should get to quote unquote know each other better and do well with each other overall, do better with each other. Um, Now we have Venus and Uranus here, both in Taurus. Venus at its strongest, Uranus there, and both are conjunct the 8th house. Venus, generally speaking, represents women. It stands for the fact that the women in Russia, the female inhabitants in general, are very materialistic. Not in a negative way, but they're very money oriented. It's quote unquote all about the money for them. Okay, they love all the things that money can buy, luxurious goods, material goods, all of that. And money is essentially the primary driving factor for associating with people, not just romantically. Think of overall when women specifically associate, and to a lesser extent the population, but specifically the women, when they associate with someone, they essentially are friends with people. They essentially, it doesn't matter whether they're seeing someone romantically or otherwise, you name it. The second they get close to someone, and they bond with someone, the primary thing that's on their mind is money. Their primary motivational factor for doing so is money. And the fact that Uranus is here afflicted also stands for the fact that that can also change at a whim. Essentially, the second you go broke and you were friends with a couple of Russian girls, then yeah, there's a good chance that they might leave you because you went broke. That's also why it's conjunct the eighth house. There's a strong focus on money, on attaining money, and on working in money. To a lesser extent, it also stands for the fact that the women work more in financial institutions compared to men. Not too much, all too much, but still comparable. Then yeah. Now we're almost nearing the end. Here comes arguably the most important part. Mars is in Cancer in the ninth house. This is not a good position. This also represents men, or this primarily represents men. It stands for the fact that work essentially frustrates them. The same thing that Mercury says. Work frustrates them to the point where they become emotionally frustrated and they have a temper, and they essentially have temper outbursts, and generally speaking, obviously, that does not go well in life overall. It has its benefits, but the drawbacks outweigh the benefits, arguably. And now, last but not least, before we go to Lilith, so the Black Moon, we have the Pot of Fortune and the Moon, both conjunct midheaven, both at their absolute strongest, with the exception of the Pot of Fortune. The Moon is at its absolute strongest, conjunct midheaven at its strongest as well, not midheaven, but the Moon. So not only is the Moon at its strongest, but the Moon is also at its strongest based on aspects, specifically the conjunction with midheaven. And then we have the Pot of Fortune, which is also good in Cancer. Like I said, the Pot of Fortune is more neutral or non-applicable when it comes to zodiac signs. It all depends on the situation, but based on its conjunction, its heavy conjunction with the Moon, then yeah, it's definitely good. This, simply speaking, stands for Russia's strong suit. The best thing that Russia has to offer as a nation stands for global exports. Russia exports a tremendous amount, a shit ton amount of natural resources. Think of gas, think of crude oil, think of anything that you can mine out of the ground. That's what the Cancer stands for. All that Cancer, yep, mining, 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 mining. Anything that you can dig up out of the earth. Precious metals, minerals, gold, platinum, palladium, all of it. Russia has it all, baby. Russia has it all. And that's what they live off of primarily. Very, very strong. And why is it in the ninth house? The ninth house indicates foreign trade. The ninth house indicates dealing with foreign investors, with foreign countries. So foreign trade, shortly summed up, simply exporting all of these through partnerships with other countries, and it just goes on and on and on. And last but not least, we have Lilith here. Lilith is in Leo in the 10th house, which stands for Russia's ruling body, essentially, the government, and everybody that's in charge, essentially, being stable and continuous, which is a good thing. But on the downside, they do keep things a secret. Let's just say obscure authoritarianism is what you can expect from Russia. Essentially, obscure authoritarianism, or a tendency to take measures that essentially lead to obscurity, or regarding matters of obscurity. Keeping things hidden, that's what the ruling body is all about, okay? Something that isn't someone else's business, they don't want anybody to know about that. And that is essentially it regarding Russia, Mother Russia. And there's not a lot I can show people in the way of so-called proof, but this cluster, the most interesting cluster, oh boy, do I have proof of this. Remember what I said here about the Moon, etc., Russia? Check this out. List of exports of Russia. The following is a list of some of the exports of Russia. Data is from 2019 in millions of United States dollars as reported by the International Trade Center. Everything in this here is in millions of dollars. Check this out. Crude petroleum, $121 million, and it just goes on, almost 121 and a half. Refined petroleum, unspecified commodities, coal, petroleum gas, wheat, semi-finished iron, gold, platinum, raw aluminum, sunwood, oils, copper, diamonds, chemical fertilizers, nitrogenous fertilizers, frozen fish, hot rolled iron, gas turbines, potassic fertilizers. All of this, look at all of this. Where do all of these come from, bitches, with the exception of frozen fish? From the soil. That's what all of this is about. And remember, even regarding frozen fish, where do they get it from? Exactly, Neptune and Pisces, like I said. Neptune is at its absolute strongest in Pisces, the modern ruler of Pisces. So you can see how accurate everything is. I don't need to say anything. I'm simply going to leave this on a note by simply doing this. GDP of Russia. Look at that. Russia's GDP is $1.779 trillion. That was the case in 2021. Russia is one of the biggest economies in the world. Definitely. See, GDP per capita rank, the 61st. That's actually quite good. GDP rank overall, the 9th. Russia is literally one of the big boys, one of the biggest boys on the market. And this is their main reason. If, for example, you take this away, oh boy, it's a nightmare for Russia. If you take away their reliance on exporting natural resources, oh boy, Russia has a big problem. But it doesn't matter. Every nation has their own weaknesses. So that's it, guys. See you until next time. Bye bye.